Well, good evening. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Salem City Council for Monday, May 9th, and ask the recorder to please call the roll.
Councillor Stapleton.
Here.
Councillor Anderson.
Present.
Councillor Phillips.
Here.
Councillor Leung. Absent. Councillor Gonzalez.
Here.
Councillor Hoy.
Here.
Councillor Nordyke.
Here.
Councillor Varney.
Here.
Mayor Bennett.
Here. Okay. Councillor Varney, you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hoy, any additions or deletions?
No.
Okay. All right, it's an opportunity now for councilors and the city manager to comment. Are there any councilors who have any comments? Councillor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the privilege last weekend of attending a big service in honor of Walter Mondale in Minneapolis, who Walter and his wife, or Fritz as he was known, happened to be a member of my brother Tim's church, and my brother did his funerals, and that got me invited through a Secret Service vetting. I guess they didn't find out what I was doing in the 60s, but we went to it, and both senators from Minnesota spoke. The governor, President Biden was there. And, you know, at first I didn't think I would say something about it at this meeting because they're all Democrats. It could be viewed as a political thing. But I think what the important thing that I learned from everyone who spoke about former Minnesota Attorney General, former Minnesota Senator, former Vice President, former presidential candidate, and former ambassador to Japan, and a regular member of my brother's church, was that he aspired and did something, and I think all of us on the council and all of us in governmental positions, especially those of us in the volunteer positions, that we aspire to do the best we can to do good for the most people in public service. And I think his life was something that we can all emulate for that standard, to treat people fairly, to listen to people, especially people who you don't necessarily agree with, but give everyone respect that is due to them as human beings. And I think that is clearly what Fritz Mondale did. And I think he could be a shining light to all of us who are on the city council and in public service.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm glad you told us about that. Vice President Mondale was, I know, a hero for many of us in our generation and after, but it's really interesting to hear you talk about the experience. Thank you very much. Councillor Gonzalez.
Merci beaucoup, Mayor. Je m'appelle Jose Gonzalez. You know, I introduced myself in multiple languages to highlight our city's longtime diversity. Today I use French. My daughter is a French teacher. They're going to plan a trip as a class and super excited, and they're going to be hosting fundraisers coming up. So I'll share the info when it's available. And I just want to give thanks to Kristen and her team over the weekend. We had an event downtown and just them being available, the staff, I mean, just made the event great. You know, so just want to thank them publicly for all their help. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jose. Vanessa, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, folks, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And although the city of Salem does not have a mental health department or provide mental health services, there's a lot that the city can do to support our community's mental health as a collective entity. And one of the things I'm really excited about is the return of First Fridays as the weather gets better, and a series of free concerts that we are putting on at our brand spanking new Rotary Amphitheater. There's a lot of research out there, boatloads of research showing the benefits of walking meeting up with friends, enjoying the beauty of our natural environment, enjoying music, enjoying culture, reuniting with people we haven't seen in a long time because of the pandemic. And so things like the First Friday events that are put on by our local businesses and the cultural activities and local bands that are going to be playing at Rotary Amphitheater, these are all cost-free ways for anyone in our city to enjoy the things that we have to offer. I also posted on my Facebook page recently that there is evidence that a lot of folks ignore the early warning signs of mental illness and mental health symptoms. And I just want to encourage everyone, as a mental health advocate, I've met with a lot of folks who've struggled with mental illness or had loved ones who are struggling with mental illness. My advice always is, don't wait. Take those symptoms seriously, go see therapists, find out what mental health services are available in your area, and, just support each other, because pandemic continues to throw a lot of curveballs at us. And even though I feel like we're starting to see light at the end of that tunnel, it seems like there's no shortage of things that come up, whether it's the threat of war or other things that are going on in the world. So anyway, please take a moment to celebrate Mental Health Awareness Month in your own way and with your loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was also going to comment on the First Friday. I had the opportunity last Friday night to stroll around downtown. It was a great event between the showers and the downpours. Walking and visiting local business owners. It was a little disturbing to talk to a number of folks who have experienced recent break-ins in their businesses, broken glass, different things in their storefronts in a variety of businesses. So that was a little disturbing, but otherwise it was a great event. I got to go to the art department and do some like a public art kind of event. It was a great fun, kind of a group project. So I had a great time. I definitely encourage people to go downtown on First Fridays, but I think it's between 4 and 8. It's a great time all over downtown.
Great, thank you. Councillor Phillips?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to take the time to talk about a couple personal things. Michelle and I were able to celebrate our 17th wedding anniversary on Saturday. And then yesterday was Mother's Day. And we couldn't quite celebrate like we normally do because I was working in the emergency room overnight on Saturday into Sunday, which leads me into my third comment, which is that as of Friday of last week, we are now in the National or possibly International Nurses Week celebration. And I've had the honor of working at the Salem Hospital Emergency Room with a team of real life superheroes for the past 14 years. What we do in the emergency room isn't possible without the nurses that I get to the honor of working with. So I wanted to, mention that International Nurses Day was Friday, and that we are celebrating International Nurses Week through, I believe, Thursday of this week. Finally, a bit of bad news. I am seeing more cases of acute COVID-19 again in the emergency room. And I would just like to remind everybody that if you're 12 and up, you can get boosted and should get boosted, which would be a third vaccine. And if you're 5 and up, you should get fully vaccinated, which is a series of 2 vaccines. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you very much. Where are you? There you are. Ms. Rutherford, anything going on?
Oh, the only thing that I would like to mention tonight is that we do have a budget meeting. This will be our 4th budget meeting on Wednesday evening, where council and the community members of the budget committee will start deliberations.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's no one else, I'll move on to proclamations. This is recognizing National Historic Preservation Month. I just wanted to mention we currently have a dig going on over at Willamette Heritage Center. Kimberly Fitzgerald, our fearless leader in archaeological expeditions, is leading that effort. And then I was notified this past week that the State Library has been named a National Historic Site, and I was real excited to see that. I think that's such a beautiful building. So, whereas National Historic Preservation Month was established in 1973 by the National Trust for Historic Preservation in order to promote historic preservation and community pride in local heritage sites. And whereas historic preservation is an effective tool for managing growth, revitalizing neighborhoods, fostering local pride, and maintaining community character while enhancing livability. And whereas the city of Salem is one of only 7 cities in Oregon designated by the Oregon Heritage Commission as a Heritage All-Star community for its wealth of heritage resources and effective programs. And whereas the city of Salem has 4 national registered districts and more than 100 individually listed historic landmarks, including Elsinore Theater, Gaiety Hollow, Thomas K. Woolen Mill, Jason Lee House, and the Southern Pacific Railroad Station. And whereas the city of Salem's hundreds of historic buildings help illuminate our city's past and brighten its future. And whereas it is important to celebrate the role of history in our lives and the contributions made by dedicated individuals in helping preserve the city's architectural heritage, now therefore I, Chuck Bennett, Mayor of the City of Salem, do hereby proclaim May 2022 as National Historic Preservation Month and call upon residents of Salem to recognize this special observance by visiting some of these sites. And this proclamation is dated the 9th of May, 2022. And here to accept the proclamation is Carol Cottingham, Chair of the Historic Landmarks Commission, who can probably expand on discussion of this activity in the city. So Carol.
Thank you. Well, I'd just like to say thank you to you, Mayor Bennett, as well as the council for ongoing support of the work, not just to the commission, but the city staff that all support this and really considering our historic resources, both in our buildings as well as our events that have been going on for years and our natural spaces we have in Salem as part of the vision of today and moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your work chairing and on the commission. That's a really important activity here in the city. Okay. I have no one signed up for public comment on agenda items other than public hearings and deliberations. So I'll go to the consent calendar. Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move approval of the consent calendar with the exception of item 3.3G, pulled by Councilor Hoy.
Okay. I'll second that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that leaves us with item 3.1A, April 25th, 2022 draft city council minutes. Item 3.2A, initiating a class 2 vacation of 3 easements adjacent to Reed Road Southeast at its intersections with Strong Road and Lindbergh Road Southeast. Item 3.2B, sorry, dog interruption. Item 3.2B, dedication of city property as public right-of-way for the construction of Gaia Street Southeast. Item 3.3A, a lease with James A. Eastridge Living Trust for use of real property located at the intersection of Front Street Southeast and Ferry Street Southeast. Item 3.3B, purchase and sale agreement with Peach Group Investments LLC for disposition of surplus city property located adjacent to Kuebler Boulevard Southeast. Item 3.3C, purchase and sale agreement with Meredith A. Coate for acquisition of real property adjacent to Franzen Reservoir. Item 3.3D, adoption of final order number 2022-6-SUB21-09, following City Council's vote to affirm phased subdivision tentative plan case number SUB21-09, subject to an amended tentative plan and additional conditions of approval. Item 3.3E, adoption of final order number 2022-8-UGA-ADJ22-01, following City Council's vote to affirm the planning administrator's decision approving phased subdivision tentative plan, urban growth area, preliminary declaration, Class 2 adjustment case number SUB-UGA-ADJ-01 for property located at 2527 Robbins Lane Southeast 97306. Item 3.3F, adoption of final order number 2022-9-CU-SPR-ADJ-DAP-DR21-05, following the City Council's vote to affirm the decision of hearings officer denying conditional use permit, Class 3 site plan review, Class 2 adjustment, Class 2 driveway approach permit, and Class 1 design review case number CU-SPR-ADJ-DAP-DR21-05 for property located at 4900 block of State Street 97301. And that concludes the consent calendar, but I would like to note that I would like to note that Councillor Phillips will be registering a no vote on item 3.3D, and Councillors Leung and Varney will be abstaining on item 3.3D.
And then I want to add, this is my understanding, Councillor Leung will be voting no on 3.3E. Is that correct, Councillor? Okay. I think that's everybody's situation. So, okay, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is regard to Councillor Phillips' no vote on, I forget the number, but it was the Myers Farm.
Right.
My understanding of this from speaking with the city attorney is that this is just like approving minutes. I voted no on it too, but I'm not going to vote no on it again because all we are doing is affirming a decision the city council made, whether we agree with it or not. So, but I appreciate Councilor Phillips. It's his ward. I appreciate him doing that. But, you know, the votes have already been recorded and counted. This is just making it official action of the city council.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, anyone else on the, yes, Councillor Nordijk.
Sure, I will join in Councillor Anderson's remarks. I too had voted against that. And so my vote today is only in recognition of that affirmation of the vote, but my position on it and why I voted no stands. So just want to make that clear for folks.
You bet. Thank you, Councillor.
You got it.
Anyone else? Councillor Leung.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make it clear I'm abstaining from 3.3D because I was not there to make a vote. And from 3.3E, I had voted no, and I'm going to stick with that no. Right. Thank you.
And Councillor Varney had a similar situation on 3.3D. As I understand it, you had not participated in the hearings on this. Is that, just in case anyone was asking?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
Okay. Great. Okay. Any further discussion? If the recorder then could please call the roll.
Councillor Varney.
Aye.
Councillor Stapleton. Aye. Councillor Anderson.
Aye.
Councillor Phillips.
Aye, with the exception previously noted.
So noted. Thank you. Councillor Leung.
Aye, same with those that I had previously noted.
Thank you. Councillor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councillor Hoy.
Aye.
Councillor Nordijk.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. We'll move then to our first public hearing, 22-169.
The Salem City Council will now hold a public hearing for the purpose of reviewing an appeal of the Planning Commission's decision approving comprehensive plan map designation, I apologize for my dog, and zone change to commercial and CR retail commercial zoning for property located at the southwest corner of the intersection for Kuebler Boulevard and I-5. The applicable criteria are SRC 64.025E2 and 265.005. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable criteria or other criteria which the person believes to apply to the decision. A failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue shall preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The hearing will be conducted with the staff presentation first, followed by testimony from the following. The applicant is limited to 10 minutes. The appellant is limited to 10 minutes. The neighborhood associations other than Cigna are limited to 5 minutes. Since Cigna is the appellant, they do not get an additional 5 minutes, just to be clear on that. Other interested parties are limited to 3 minutes, and the applicant's rebuttal is limited to 5 minutes, limited to matters which were introduced during the public hearing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's begin with our staff presentation.
Good evening. My name is Olivia Diaz with the Planning Division. I would like to enter the staff reports, the presentation, and the comments submitted by Cigna and by Mark Shipman after the staff report was published into the record. The case was originally scheduled for public hearing before council on March 28th. The applicant proposed to change the application. Council opened that hearing, took no testimony, and continued to today. We're here for a comprehensive plan change application for the subject property, which is located south of Kuebler Boulevard, as shown on the map, west of I-5. The property abuts a parkway, which is Kuebler, shown in red, a collector street, 27th, which is shown in yellow. The subject property, shown in green, is residential agriculture with a developing residential plan designation, along with the property to the northwest, Morningside Church. To the north and to the west, shown in red, is CR, which is commercial retail with a commercial designation. And to the south, shown in orange, is multifamily residential 2 with a multifamily residential designation. The subject property is currently vacant with the interstate to the east. Costco is currently to the west of the subject property. There is a recently completed retirement facility located to the south, and then the commercial land across Kuebler to the north is currently vacant. The applicant proposed and the Planning Commission approved a commercial retail zone change and a commercial comprehensive plan designation for the entire property. This is the original proposal that the applicant had submitted. Staff had recommended denial of the CR, commercial retail zoning change, which is addressed in the Planning Commission staff report, which is attachment 4 and 5 of your May 9th staff report. As previously mentioned, the applicant did change their proposal after the appeal was submitted, and their proposal changed to request 14.5 acres be zoned commercial retail or CR zoning, and 9.8 acres shown would be MU2, mixed use 2. The red outlines the proposed commercial retail zone designation, and the remainder of the site was proposed for mixed use. The applicant provided this conceptual plan for the 2 uses, but did not update traffic data or the transportation planning analysis. The May 9th staff report outlines the traffic concerns, regardless if the property was zoned entirely CR or split zone CRMU. On May 4th, the applicant submitted a letter changing the request back for the entire property to be zoned CR commercial retail. The applicant's updated the Planning Commission's decision included several conditions of approval, including limiting drive-throughs for 3 uses on the site, limiting retail stores to 70,000 gross square feet, and then traffic mitigation to the existing transportation system. The applicant's conceptual plan that was submitted, the last slide, is inconsistent with the Planning Commission's decision. There are more than 3 uses with drive-throughs on that conceptual plan. The buildings are more than 70,000 square feet, and the traffic mitigation is not shown, which includes 7 lanes at the intersection of Kuebler Boulevard and 27th. The applicant has provided findings which are in your staff report. The transportation planning rule analysis provided indicated that the proposal will have a significant effect on the city's transportation system. Staff's opinion is that the mitigation provided by the applicant does not adequately restore the transportation system to a level of service before development. As identified in your staff report, several intersections would fail and be over capacity or cause significant congestion. Kevin Hodman, the city traffic engineer, is here to answer any questions regarding the traffic study. South Gateway, a neighborhood association, appealed the application, provided multiple comments included, and those are included in your staff report today. Morningside and Morningside Neighborhood Association and 4 other surrounding property owners expressed opposition to the proposed change. Comments are addressed in the Planning Commission staff report, which is attached to your May 9th staff report. The majority of the comments are related to the traffic impacts in the area. Staff recommends denial of the comprehensive plan change and zone change to either CR or U2 CR. And I'm available for any questions.
Hey, thank you, Olivia. I'm sure there will be. We'll go, I think, first to the applicant. I've got 4 people signed up. Mark Shipman, are you the lead person on this, or do you have someone else who's going to be?
No, Mayor, I'm the lead on this.
Yeah, there's 4 of you, so be aware of your 10-minute limit. I know you know this.
We are. Thank you very much, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Mark Shipman. I'm a land use attorney with Sawfield Griggs, 250 Church Street Southeast, Suite 200, Salem, Oregon, 97301. Here this evening on behalf of the applicant, Boone Road Commercial, LLC, and the property owner, Kuebler Cascade View, LLC. Also here with me this evening, as you've mentioned, is Doug Sproul. He's the president of the Mosaic Development and Mosaic Management Group. He is one of the owners and of the applicant group and of the property owner group. Jeremy Shanefelter is the director of development with Mosaic Development and Mosaic Management. And then Scott Manser is our traffic engineer with DKS Associates. So first, I'd like to address a packet that I think you received tonight from Cigna, and I wanted to address Mr. Krishman's response to my letter of clarification to the staff. I feel I owe Jake and Cigna an apology. I meant no disrespect to Jake or to Cigna for the time that Jake and Jeremy Shanefelter spent in trying to reach a compromise with the split zone concept. They spent considerable amount of time in trying to reach an agreement on a split zone concept that both parties could agree to, but we ran out of time. And the parties were stuck on a couple of key points that they were not going to resolve before Friday or on Monday. My letter to staff was simply communicating with staff that Cigna and the applicant hadn't reached 100% consensus on the split zone concept when I drafted the letter, and as such, the applicant needed to stick with the CR zoning as approved by the Planning Commission, and that was all it was intended for. So the question before you this evening is, should you affirm the decision of the Planning Commission approving this change from RA to CR? And you should. This is a basic comprehensive plan zone change application. And over the past couple of years, you have approved these types of applications, and this one's no different. The applicant currently meets or can meet with appropriate conditions of approval, the mandatory approval criteria for this request. As such, the code requires approval. So we received approval from the Planning Commission to rezone the property, as noted by staff, from RA to CR. This is the right decision based on all the facts and evidence in front of them, and nothing has changed since that approval. So I want to address the split zone concept real quick that was raised, identified in the staff report. I don't believe we formally told staff that we were changing our application. It had always been an option, and after receiving the Planning Commission's approval to go to CR and Cigna's appeal, the applicant reached out to Cigna to see if they could come to an agreement with potential mixed or split zone on the property, what that would look like. The parties had multiple conversations, exchanged concepts and concept plans. While there are many challenges with the split zone concept, as staff has noted, the parties couldn't reach consensus on all points. And the split zone concept was really predicated on the applicant and Cigna reaching 100% consensus with respect to the allocations of the zoning districts, allowed uses, and Cigna agreeing to testify in support of our zone change request, none of which is going to happen tonight. So therefore, we're left with the approval to CR as originally presented. So the Planning Commission's decision is important because they found we satisfied all the approval criteria for the zone change. It is important to note in the staff report for tonight's hearing that planning staff summarized the Planning Commission decision by stating that the Planning Commission found that the applicant's testimony was more compelling than the analysis of staff, and that still holds true. Bottom line, the Planning Commission found that we would not degrade the transportation system, rather that our proposed mitigation would leave the transportation system in better condition than it would be if the CR zoning and eventual development on the property was not completed. So I'd like you to turn to the conditions of approval of the Planning Commission decision because they're important. They can be found in the staff report at pages 16 and 17 of your packet. There are only 3, but they're dense. The first is it can't contain more than 3 drive-throughs. Property can't have any retail store building greater than 70,000 square feet. And what these signify is that the Planning Commission heard Cigna's concerns about not having an unlimited destination retail center, but that Cigna wanted more localized retail that the neighbors would frequent support. The Planning Commission purposely limited the number of drive-throughs and put a cap on the square footage of any retail store building to be no larger than 70,000 square feet. They agreed with Cigna on limiting the size of retail buildings so no big box stores could be located on the subject property. The Planning Commission felt this was a reasonable limitation and on the applicant based on the testimony and evidence in the record. Further, the Planning Commission understood that Mosaic Development does not want to ruin their flagship property. As noted by staff, Mosaic developed and owns the senior living facility Boone Ridge immediately to the south of this property. That's an $80 million facility that Mosaic built, and it is their shining gem. They purposely purchased the subject property because they wanted a balanced project that would benefit the residents of their own senior living community as well as the Southway Gateway neighborhood as a whole. So finally, the Planning Commission agreed with our traffic engineers, DKS Associates, that in order to meet the transportation planning rule, commonly known as the TPR, the applicant would need to complete the traffic mitigation found in that third condition of approval. And the traffic mitigation is extensive. We're not hiding that. In summary, there's 3 different intersections that get additional improvements, signal modifications, striping, and queuing. In addition, the applicant's going to be required to build a slip of bypass lane on the subject property to ensure that the roundabout and queuing on 27th will perform properly. The total cost of the traffic mitigation is estimated to be $4 million. So if you affirm the Planning Commission's decision, the applicant is required to complete these conditions of approval. However, if you don't approve this and you rely on the Salem process, which some may be wondering about, and then these improvements don't come with the Salem process. They only come with this process and tagging this applicant at this time. So what's the remaining issue? Well, it's still about traffic and the perceived belief that the rezoning to CR will cause significant problems to the transportation system. And there's still a belief that the Costco TIA was wrong and there will be too much traffic and it'll cause delays and gridlock in the system, and that our TPR analysis was wrong. The problem with these beliefs is they're not supported by facts or evidence, but only conjecture. What Cigna and staff have not brought to your attention is that if you do nothing, the system will fail. At least with the applicant's proposal, you have the opportunity to require them to mitigate their impacts so there's no further degradation to the transportation system. And here's the hard reality about traffic in this area. When you approve Costco and the Kittleson traffic impact analysis, you believed in the professionals and the report, the evidence, and their numbers, and trusted that the roundabout and other improvements to Kuebler, 27th, and Battle Creek Road would work, and you were right. The reality is that the first 2 months of Costco are the highest volumes of traffic. That's just a known fact. And the traffic's moving well through this portion of town. The roundabout and other improvements that PacTrust completed, they work well. Getting into and out of Costco is smooth. And why is that? Well, Costco designed the choke points to be internal to the Costco site, such that the stacking will occur on the Costco property and allow for gradual release of cars on the 27th Avenue and into the roundabout. The same will hold true for the Kuebler Village property to the east. Excess stacking will occur on site, and the slip bypass lane will continue to allow traffic to flow well out onto Kuebler Boulevard through this portion of town. There currently is no backup on 27th, and the system is functioning just the way that Kittleson designed, projected, and the way you approved it. There's no reason to not believe DKS's analysis that the mitigation for the Kuebler Village project will function just as well. Our traffic report is based on the background data of the Costco traffic report, and it is sound. The methodology and analysis performed by DKS is appropriate based on best practices and the city public works standards for a TPR analysis. There's no claim that DKS's work is inappropriate. ODOT further found that the DKS traffic analysis report and proposed mitigation were sound. It met the TPR, and ODOT did not ask for any additional mitigation than conditioned. Another important factor for you to realize is the city will still have total control of the site after the zone change approval. This application is just the first of many site plan review applications that will need to be filed by the applicant. Each site plan review application will require a new and individualized traffic impact analysis through the site plan process as each pad is developed. So the city will still have the ability to ensure that the transportation system in this location functions as it should. Simply put, we're going to leave the traffic system better than we found it. There is no basis to deny. So what is the basis for denial or reversal of this application? There is none. While staff have done a good job of summarizing our request and the issues that Cigna has against this specific proposal, nothing in the staff report or Cigna's appeal warrants a reversal or denial of this development application. The application meets all the approval criteria and should be affirmed as conditioned by the Planning Commission. Thank you for your attention and consideration tonight. I'm happy to address any questions that you may have for me or for the applicant or for the traffic engineer. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor.
We're-
Mr. Mayor, Dan Atchison,
Here's
City
Mr.
Attorney.
Okay.
I apologize for interrupting. Before we get into further testimony, I wanted to take an opportunity to allow any counselors to disclose any ex-parte contacts you might have had.
I just have one comment to make, as in one of the items, specifically in the document. There was some notes that were submitted. I believe it was attachment B, and it was notes that were taken by Andy Harmon from Steele Associates Architects. Attendees, it shows my name on there. That is incorrect. I had left the meeting, the Cigna Gateway meeting before the conversation took place.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor. Dan, was there anything else?
No, thank you.
Counselor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Shipman, for your usual thorough and interesting presentation here. I'm wondering if you could expand a little bit, Mark, on your discussion of our Salem, where I guess one contention is that our Salem could take care of some of these issues, and your view was that it wouldn't happen under our Salem. I'm wondering if you could expand on that a little bit, please.
Sure, Councilor Anderson, thank you for the, initially our Salem had this property designated and proposed as CR. And then midway through the process, that was changed to CO. And that's what the Planning Commission has approved and has recommended to you. But the R-Salem process is a legislative process. It's not quasi-judicial. And as a part of the R-Salem process, all it does two things. One, it changes the comprehensive plan to commercial, which we're seeking for as well. But it changes the zoning to CO for the entire property. And we don't believe that the CO zoning is appropriate, and not getting into the differences between the CO and the CR zone. But the big ticket item here that I wanted to try and articulate to you, Councilor Anderson, and the rest of the councilors is that you have the applicant on the hook now for $4 million of upgrades to the transportation system in this corridor, okay? If you don't approve this, the system is going to fail, okay? It's going to fail. Our application improves the system, and actually at the end of the 20-year planning horizon, it makes it no better, and in fact, it makes it no worse. It makes it better than it would be had this project not gone. That's the requirement of the transportation planning rule. That's the requirement that we have under the quasi-judicial application. If you do the legislative application with our Salem, then you don't get that $4 million. What you get is you essentially are going to get abutting improvements by the applicant if they come in for a CO zone. And the CO zone is going to, it's not going to produce the types of mixed uses that that South Gateway Neighborhood Association really wants to see out there. You're not going to be able to put in any sort of a grocery store. You're not going to be able to put in a lot of the uses that the applicant is seeking to establish out there. And more importantly, the one thing that we've been seeing in a couple sectors is, one, commercial office is a dying zone. That's not a good zone for our community. It is people can get into the industrial commercial and into other zones cheaper than to put in office buildings. And people aren't clamoring to put in office buildings or uses allowed in the CO zone right now. So I think there's a number of factors there, Councillor Anderson, as to why the CO zone, if you went with our Salem, you're not getting those improvements that the applicant is on the hook for right here.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask a follow-up?
Certainly.
Yeah. So are you saying, Mr. Shipman, that let's say there's no development there at all? It sounded to me like you were saying the traffic and transportation system is going to fail anyway. Is that what you were saying?
I did say that.
Okay, just checking. Thank you.
Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilor Anderson, for some of those questions. Those were some of the things I was going to explore. Mr. Shipman, I had a couple of questions about the planning commission's conditions, and then whether you met them or not. Because in my reading, they had basically you could build a building as long as it wasn't about 1.5 football fields in size, and only 3 drive-throughs on the property. But your proposal it doesn't meet those 2 criteria. That it's bigger, it's more than 70,000 square feet, and you have 4 drive-throughs. So I'm not clear on that. So can you help me understand that?
Sure. The concept plan doesn't line up with the Planning Commission's conditions of approval, Councillor Hoy. That's something that we should have caught and we didn't catch. But the Planning Commission's conditions of approval are what they are, and we're willing to abide by them.
Okay. And could you expand on your comment that the system's going to fail if there's no development here? The traffic system's going to fail based on current conditions. Why is that? Why do you think that is?
Sure. I'm probably not the best one to articulate on that, Councillor Hoy. I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to have Scott Manser from DKS Associates explain that.
Sure.
He would be much more qualified and better able to be able to address yours and Councillor Anderson's concerns.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Manser. Not hearing you yet.
You hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. Scott Manser with DKS Associates. Address is 117 Commercial Street Southeast, Salem, Oregon. So to respond to Councilor Anderson and Councilor Hoy's question related to the system failing, I just want to clarify something. When we do a transportation planning rule analysis, which is what we have to do under the current CR, we have to evaluate this current City of Salem planning horizon from your transportation system plan, which looks out 20 years. And it assumes the current zoning and it assumes trips. And so what Mr. Shipman is talking about is when you assume that the different properties around this area, that those are developed under the current zoning, the traffic will lead to failure at many of the intersections along Kuebler Boulevard in the future. Once you look out that 20 years of growth.
Yes, go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. So as I understood the application, there's going to be 7 lanes on 27th or at Kuebler and 27th. And you think that is sufficient to handle whatever this traffic is that you think is coming, regardless of whether this is developed or not? I guess I'm confused because it seems like you said something different than what Mr. Shipman said. He said it's going to fail if there's no development. You said it's going to fail if there's the development under the current plan. So I'm confused.
Yeah, I don't. From the transportation analysis rule, when we talk about failure, we did a 20-year analysis. And with that, the no build assumption that Mark is speaking of would be building it out at the current zone, not, so there would be development on that site, but it's under the current zone. And then we compare that to what the CR that we're proposing.
Okay, so you're not Mr. Shipman didn't mean to suggest that it's going to fail if everything stays the same, then suddenly traffic's going to increase sufficiently to make that system fail. That's not what he meant.
Mark, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I believe that is the case.
Thank you.
Councilor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is a bit confusing because we approved Costco. The original reason we denied Costco, the trees, and the second one was traffic issues and transportation issues. And we were told that that wasn't any issue. Well, here we are at the next development, and we're told that the system is going to fail. That's just I don't expect either of the folks on part of the applicant to respond to that. I suppose you could if you want, but it doesn't make much sense to me. We approved Costco with the traffic, and traffic was great at Costco, even knowing there's this big empty lot right next to Costco. And now we're said this empty lot is developed, the traffic system is going to fail.
Yep.
So that's just a statement more than a real question. But I'd love to hear any answers if you have them. So,
Councilor Anderson, I'd love to take a cut at responding to your question. One thing Mark talked a little bit about is if you move forward with our Salem, you're not going to get the 4 million. And there's different requirements for traffic study. And what we're talking about right now is a transportation planning rule analysis. We're looking 20 years out in the future, and we're required to analyze the worst case scenario under that CR zoning. And that's what we've analyzed. That doesn't necessarily mean that's going to match our development plan. We've looked at CR, and we've looked at the maximum number of trips that we can fit on that site, and that's what we've analyzed. But once the zoning is approved, then we would come in with our actual application and look at a day of opening analysis. And that's the difference between what we're talking about now and the Costco application. The zone change was approved. Then the recent traffic study that you looked at, that was just at a short-term day of opening analysis, not that 20-year. And that's the difference between those two. Does that help answer your question?
Well, it helps answer my question, but it gives me a whole different philosophical take on it that I have that we don't really, it's not appropriate to discuss it tonight. So I'll defer to Councilor Hoy.
Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to go back to some more of Mr. Shipman's comments regarding his characterization of us trusting the analysis with Costco. My recollection of those facts are a little different. I recall not trusting those and actually denying that. And we were ordered to approve it by LUBA and the Court of Appeals. So that's not the same as trusting those facts. So I guess, Mr. Shipman, I'm happy to, if you want to offer some thoughts on that, but those are my recollection of those facts. It wasn't that we trusted them, it's that we were ordered to do what we did, and we did it.
All right. Do you want to, Ms. Shipman, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions if I could. It's very clear the issue here is transportation. I'll tell you, just from my experience over the years, this is a very unusual situation where staff comes in and asks us to deny a decision by the Planning Commission. And I can't tell you how surprised I was to see that happen and how disappointed I was that this couldn't get worked out. As I understand it, there is no time limit here to resolving the issues that are at stake here. So the idea that time ran out, I think might be an overstatement of the situation. My understanding is the timeline is not static at this point. There is no point at which it has to be called. And I guess I'm just bothered that this didn't get worked out. I'm looking at the transportation, the statewide goal 12 issues in our report, which was just exhaustive report on this thing, but it did simply state, I thought, and directly, that the issues with our staff is over transportation. It says that ODOT does not support the mitigation approach. Now, maybe that was an earlier, you know, some of this, I got a little confused as to where this was in the process, but ODOT did not seem thrilled with this. They saw problems developing at the I-5 interchange. It's identified by our staff as the sole reason to deny this was the inability to get this transportation issue resolved. That's how they word it to us, and seemed to focus very heavily on the traffic count and when you all did your traffic count and how accurate that traffic count is because of the pandemic, because Costco was under construction, not completed. They describe for those of us who looked at the old Costco and thought it had problems, this is sort of a nightmarish view of the whole area goes into gridlock. We watched it back up to I-5 from the old Costco location at Hawthorne. And I just didn't see how to resolve that. And then going into the review by our Public Works Department just was really, boy, talk about an unsympathetic report. I mean, you look at these reports, Mark, and you can't find a way to get around what they're saying about this. And I didn't hear you describe how to get around what they're saying. I could not hear how to get around their concerns and a very strong recommendation that we deny this. Can you help us out a little here? I mean, and then explain why we're where we are, given the timelines you've got, which is you have plenty of time to work this thing out.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to start with, I'm going to have Scott address ODOT. Scott, you want to start off with ODOT? You're muted.
So Mayor, I'm not aware of ODOT coming out and saying that they didn't support our analysis. I have a letter from
You said they don't support your mitigation.
So yeah,
the analysis is just questioned by everybody, but the mitigation question is what's specifically cited.
Okay. Well, just the letter that we have kind of recommends that they agree with our findings. And I'm not aware of any additional analysis from or testimony from ODOT regarding kind of the recommendation. We made a recommendation to meet their standard, and they weren't. I mean, we said, here's what you could do, but they didn't like the idea from a safety standpoint, and therefore, but it wasn't. They still supported the application and agreed with our findings.
Boy, this seems just sort of real straightforward. The evidence in the record shows there is a significant effect to the I-5 southbound ramp, and mitigation outlined would address the significant impact. Based on the Oregon Department of Transportation letter, ODOT does not support the mitigation. And that just seemed real straightforward to me. Maybe it's more subtle, and I'm not saying I understand all this transportation discussion, but maybe it's more subtle than ODOT does not support the mitigation. Maybe there's something hidden away in there that I can't figure out. That's why you're here.
Yeah. So
put some light on this thing. Why are they saying that?
So Mark, if you want to jump in, I'll read through the letter one more time and be prepared to respond to the
Thanks,
mayor.
Scott. Mayor, I don't believe that ODOT had a problem with our mitigation, and I don't believe that they didn't have a problem with the analysis that DKS did. I don't believe that Kevin Hotman had a problem with DKS's analysis with respect to the traffic. I know that Kevin and others have had concerns with respect to the traffic counts, but we took the traffic counts. You know, DKS took the traffic counts when they took the traffic counts, and there was nothing else that we could do during the pandemic to change that. The other thing that I would state is that I think that you're right. Staff has been not so much planning staff, but public works staff and really the traffic group has been very concerned with respect to this application. But I think in times, Mayor, that they've conflated some things. They've pointed out that we didn't supply weekend counts, but the weekend counts aren't part of the traffic, the TPR analysis. The weekend counts are actually a part of the TIA analysis that would come later, as what Costco did for as Scott identified for their day of opening report. So I think there's some things that traffic staff conflated with respect to the different analysis that one would do in a TPR analysis versus a TIA analysis. And they do get into the minutia, and they do get into, they can be subtle. And so really, I think this is all the information that the Planning Commission took into consideration. They heard all this testimony from staff, from DKS. They had the ODOT information in front of them. And they felt very strongly. In fact, the Planning Commission voted 7-1 to approve this. And so when it comes to you with that recommended, Planning Commission's approving it, but planning staff and public works staff are still, adamantly opposed. And I understand why they're opposed, but the reality, Mayor, is that we've addressed all the approval criteria. We've provided substantial evidence, and that's the best I could do. I think one of the things that hopefully Scott can address is with respect to ODOT and mitigations at I-5.
Yeah, and Mayor, they did, as I look at and kind of read through in general in the ODOT letter, I mean, it's very clear. They said the updated TIA prepared by DKS provides an appropriate level of analysis and mitigation to address the potential impacts of the proposed rezone. And then they go in to talk about the third lane and how it is a reasonable mitigation. However, they don't really support it for safety reasons. But they came back and said it was found that the applicant's methodology used it to determine their mitigation measures to address potential significant impacts is appropriate. So they came back and basically what we told them is, here's what it would take to meet your standard, but it wasn't reasonable. So I see what you're saying, but they still supported our recommendations overall for the transportation system to meet our proportionate share of what our application should be applying based on our impacts.
And then just finally in this, and I'll go to Trevor Phillips here in just a second. I just want to check it out. I don't have it right in front of me, but I'll play with my memory on this one. I think it was about our staff said about a $5.25 million for mitigation, and you all would put up 1.75, leaving 3.x. I just can't do the math quick enough in my head, that we would have to take care of, that there was really not a full mitigation resolution by the developer. Do you recall how all that worked? How was your money going on the mitigation? You gave some other numbers that I kind of caught my attention.
Mayor, I think there's a couple things. One, I guess we can talk about the mitigation of the money, and then one thing we haven't talked about is just the timelines, and I don't want to ignore that. Okay. With respect to mitigation and the money, those numbers I believe were put in before the Planning Commission. That was in the Planning Commission staff report. And so at the Planning Commission, based on the testimony from DKS and staff, DKS, as a part of their analysis, had come up with a list of improvements that based on their analysis and based on their professional expertise and experience, those improvements would essentially put the system in a no worse position than, as Scott identified, than if the property was to develop. And so under the RA zone. And so what planning staff did is they they grabbed, in addition to the other two conditions of approval, they grabbed the outline that DKS provided in their traffic analysis with respect to everything that the applicant would have to provide. Now that number, it may be different than what Kevin has identified, and it may be different with respect to how staff has calculated what those potential improvements may be. But in this case, the applicant is as I indicated earlier, they're on the hook for those improvements that the Planning Commission required. We've estimated, DKS has come up with an estimate of around $4 million for those improvements, to be able to make the system essentially not fail. So, and I don't know if that doesn't really clear up the question. And Scott, feel free to. Are you
on the hook for $4 million then? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the applicant's on the hook as a part of the Planning Commission decision. They're on the hook for $4 million. That's correct.
But there was some earlier discussion about doing something lesser, and the applicant went ahead and said they would just do everything. So that's where we've gotten to the $4 million at this point.
Well, that seemed to be very, I know the mitigation issues seemed persuasive to the Planning Commission. It seemed like a lot of it was kind of, we promise we'll do it kind of discussion. And maybe that's just the way the whole thing worked as you worked with them, but it had that feeling of kind of trust us on this thing rather than it's all locked down. Did I read that wrong?
I think you may have read that wrong.
Okay.
I think there's, one thing that we haven't discussed is requiring a development agreement between the city and the applicant, where the city could require that the applicant have these improvements in before, a certain number of uses or certain uses put on the property. That's typically what we would see in a situation like that. Yeah. We've not gotten to that point with staff because of kind of the position that they've taken up to this point. But I think that would be a reasonable condition of approval that we could work out with Dan as a part of this approval.
It just you're helping me out, kind of feeling in some ways like this is premature, that it's in front of us for denial, remand, or approval. I mean, it's kind of like there's just so many missing. It feels like so many missing pieces. But let me listen further, and I'm sure other counselors have questions that'll help fill them in. Counselor Phillips.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Bennett, and thank you everybody for answering our questions. So my questions may be overly simplistic, but what's different between this now, what we're considering, and what went through the Planning Commission? What were you guys talking about mixed use when it was presented to the Planning Commission? And is that no longer part of this? Like, what's changed in terms of mixed use, yes or no?
Great question, Councilor Phillips. At the Planning Commission, Cigna raised the issue with respect to, they wanted to see mixed use on the site, but they didn't articulate what that looked like or what they would like to see in that way with respect to the property. And it wasn't until after the Planning Commission had approved the applicant's request to CR that the applicant and Cigna were able to get together in a more concerted fashion and talk about what that might look like and what that could be. So there wasn't a lot of discussion, at least from the applicant side, with respect to going to the mixed zoning on the property at the Planning Commission. So what's different between our request now and at the Planning Commission? And it's really nothing, or it's the same request. And I realized that, which is the reason why we submitted that letter and last Thursday was that we recognized that this was going to be confusing, and I tried to make sure that it would be as less confusing as possible coming into the council, because you hadn't sat through the entire Planning Commission hearing, and you'd have to listen to the tapes, and that would be a lot with respect to going through that. And there had been a couple of hearings before the Planning Commission. So really our request is the same tonight as it was before the Planning Commission. The Cigna and the applicant had tried to come up with an alternative approach, which was the split zone, and they just fell short with respect to reaching that. And that kind of goes to, if I can, Mayor Bennett, with respect to the timeline question. I don't feel like we are premature in this request. This is no different than any other comp plan zone change case that you've handled as you've identified. The couple of differences are: one, staff's not supportive of it. Two, there is a traffic issue, but I believe that DKS's analysis is strong and it's solid. But three, we took a run at it with, and I say we, the royal we, I was not involved in those discussions. Jeremy Shanefelter and Jake with Cigna spent time talking back and forth, emailing, communicating with each other. And at some point, I just felt like we needed to move this forward to the council. If you're, and that was a call that we made, just based on how the discussions kind of came down to a point, Mayor, where Cigna didn't want to see any drive-throughs on the property whatsoever, and that's just impracticable in this age. And the Planning Commission took a balanced approach. And they said, hey, you can have no more than 3, and we're okay with no more than 3. And then Cigna also didn't want to have any building on the property greater than 50,000 square feet. And that just, you can't have a motel on the property. That would mean you couldn't have a 3-story motel. That would mean that you couldn't have certain medical or other office buildings. You couldn't even have apartments on the property because you couldn't have a building greater than 50,000 square feet. But that's not what the Planning Commission did. The Planning Commission said very specifically that you can't have a retail building, okay? A retail commercial building that was greater than 70,000 square feet. Big difference. And that enables the applicant to put in a natural grocer on the property, and be able to put in the office buildings, apartments, hotels, things that they've shown in concept. That's not the actual plan, but they've shown in concept that could be placed out there.
Thank you for kind of helping me understand what was in the Planning Commission decision and what wasn't. My follow-up questions are, again, we're still talking about transportation, and I think that the reason that staff are recommending a commercial office is because it has fewer trips generated. Do you guys agree that the CO commercial office generates fewer trips, or are you saying that commercial retail is guaranteed to have less trips than commercial office?
I'll take a cut at that, Mark. The commercial office zoning will definitely have fewer trips. It's not a huge change, but there will be fewer peak hour trips under the CO than they are under the CR.
And your opinion is that the mitigation makes up for that difference?
Correct, significantly.
Okay. And then do you have an opinion on mixed use 2? Would it be more or less trips than CO, commercial office?
I'm sorry, what's currently shown on that plan?
Well, just the compromise that never happened. Hypothetically, if you guys were able to resurrect the mixed use 2, would that generate more or less trips than commercial office?
On the plan that Mark had shown, or the staff had shown, with some of those uses, that it would generate fewer trips than the CR as well.
The question was mixed use 2. The part that's maybe there's no answer. I could ask staff. But you've agreed that CR will generate more trips than CO. I guess my question is the mixed use 2 that is no longer being considered after the failed negotiations with the local neighborhood association. Is that equivalent to CO, or is it more than CO, mixed use 2?
I'm not sure on the mixed use 2.
Okay,
I believe it would be less though. CR is one of the highest generating zones.
And then I just thought of a question. So the mayor brought up some interesting questions. So the ODOT was concerned about safety impacts at some of the intersections, including I-5 intersection out here on Kuebler. How do we like get convinced that that's not a major issue? I don't think I've ever heard that in listening to these things for the past 4 years, where there's a safety issue.
Yeah, it wasn't. Let me clarify that. So when you talk about safety issue, there was a very small amount of impact at the interchange ramp, and so what our job in the TPR is to say, okay, what can we do to mitigate our impact? And when we looked at that impact, we said, oh well, here's what you would have to do to make this, to meet that small amount of impact. And what was proposed would be to make three right turns off the ramp, and you just triple rights is not something that we want to see in Oregon anytime soon. And so it was one of those things we were making some recommendations and discussing, here's what you need to do it, but it doesn't really make sense. And that's where we've talked. That's kind of what the discussion was with ODOT. But ODOT also has a policy that says that if you don't impact it so much, from the TPR, we're okay. And that's kind of that's how ODOT was able to get behind and support our application.
I have no further questions at this time.
Thank you. Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Mr. Shipman, you see a lot of these hearings and you attend a lot of them, and you know that neighborhood associations and neighbors almost always come in and say, when we're considering development, oh, there's going to be a huge traffic impact. And staff always says, yeah, no, there's not. If you look at the math, you look at the science, it's really not going to be a significant impact. But this time they said, there's going to be a significant impact. So to help us understand why you think staff is wrong, narrow it down, like why do you think the staff's analysis is not accurate? Help me get there.
Well, Councilor Hoy, thank you. We'll get there in two ways. I will get there kind of in a practical way, and then I'm going to have Scott talk a little bit with respect to the technical, because I think there's a big difference between how the applicant through DKS views it with respect to how Kevin is viewing it, and we acknowledge that there's going to be a significant impact, which is why we acknowledge there is a significant impact. We trigger goal 12. There's no question about it. We're not trying to say that we don't. We do. But what we're saying is that as a part of goal 12, we satisfy all of the elements and requirements of goal 12 as written in the rule. And the way that we get there is that we get there through the analysis that DKS did with respect to their counts, and DKS just didn't rely on their counts. They relied on the Costco study as the base study with respect from which our study then piggybacks on, okay? So it wasn't just our analysis and our study alone. It was the Costco study as well. So there's that issue. The second issue is then it comes down to the mitigation. And what DKS has done with respect to the mitigation is DKS is essentially under the rule, if there's a significant impact, we can't make it any worse. We have to make it at least as good or better, okay, at that 20-year horizon. And what DKS has done is they've worked through those numbers in order to get us to that point based on their expertise, based on their professional evaluation. DKS is a solid traffic engineering firm. They do work for the city of Salem. They do work for ODOT. They're well respected. And so when they did this work and they presented it to the city staff, they had concerns, and we acknowledge those concerns, but I think maybe Scott can address that a little further with respect to the technical.
Yeah, the big thing I think that really came down to the staff questioning our work is when you do a traffic study, and once the council approved Costco, that's an approved development. And so then we come in to do our traffic study, and we take all of those assumptions from that Costco development and we plug those in our study. And what staff wanted us to do is they wanted us to wait down the road to when Costco was open, do additional counts, and then so basically delay this. And we've been working on this traffic study for a long time. And I think we'd be happy to go out and do counts. However, with every type of development, and I'm sure Public Works would agree to this, there's a honeymoon period. You open a Krispy Kreme donuts, or you open a Costco, they end up having quite a bit more traffic. Typically in the range can be as high as 20 to 30% more traffic the first few months after it's opened. And so we would have to wait a significant time to update our analysis. But it really, I would say we've been able from a TPR standpoint to say, based on the assumptions, and this is the process we follow all the time with traffic studies. You have a subdivision with 100 units that's approved. We then take the traffic information and we apply that, and then we add our traffic on top and we analyze it. And the process we've gone through is the same process we've done for 50 to 100 other traffic studies in the city of Salem over the years. There's just a lot at stake here, and there was just a lot at stake with the Costco development. I think that's why there's concern on the staff level. But we've followed all the protocols from the transportation planning rule, from every intersection. We looked at that. We've looked at what our impacts are. One thing I can guarantee is we've overestimated for our site what's going to be generated there because of the TPR and having to do a worst case analysis on the CR zone. I guarantee what the site plan that ends up coming out is going to be significantly less. And that's where we'll further analyze this site down the road when we actually have a site plan. Once the zoning's approved and we know what we're putting on the site, we'll even have a more detailed traffic study that will at that point analyze that Costco traffic, and we'll do additional counts and do that just like the last application. Costco, you had a zone change that was approved. They had one traffic study based on that zone change, which met the TPR requirements, and then they came back to you at the site plan level and had another traffic study. And so that would be that same process. But the mitigations we've recommended is for that net increase in traffic from our site.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on then. Ms. Sproul, I see you. Were you answering a question or?
This is actually Jeremy Shanefelder. Mark referred to me earlier. Doug's here as well, but I was just around in case people wanted to ask questions. I was just making myself present.
Okay.
But thank you.
Sorry.
No problem.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Oh, no problem at all.
Okay. Jake Krishnan, the chair representing South Gateway Neighborhood Association, 10 minutes, Jake.
Thank you, Mayor Bennett. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Good evening, Mayor Bennett, City Councilors, and Planning Department staff. My name is Jake Krishnan, and I'm the chair of SIGNA. At the outset, I'd like to appreciate Mr. Shipman's acknowledgement of the extensive collaboration, and I'd like to thank Jeremy from Mosaic for a very collaborative working relationship here. It's been unusual, but it's been good. I think I have the ability to share my screen. Okay, yeah.
There you
go. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay.
Good work.
Cool. So I'd like to take you through, I have already provided my written testimony, in fact, multiple, but I'd just like to use 3 or 4 slides to summarize. And I'm not going to belabor some of the points that were already raised earlier. So we all know this is the situation here. SIGNA has expressed its opposition to the proposed rezoning into CR for several reasons. And there has been active collaboration, as I mentioned, between SIGNA and Mosaic. Unfortunately, the divergence could not be bridged on some critical elements, and I'll go into that in a little bit. Essentially, I'd summarize SIGNA's concerns into 3 buckets. One is traffic issues. I think you heard enough about the traffic issues. You're already probably more aware than those issues than I could explain, but that was number 1. And this, we heavily relied on the planning staff comments around the inadequate transportation planning rule analysis, as well as the proposed traffic mitigation. The second one was around, SIGNA wanted to specify usage restrictions where we could specify non-allowed uses into the decision, whichever zoning category, right? And this we did specifically to avoid any type of Costco scenarios that could develop if CR or whatever version of it was allowed, but there was no guardrail to hem in what was actually would be allowed to be built out. And the third one is we did look at split zoning partition. We started this conversation with Mosaic about how to look at if some of the intended uses could be fulfilled by other zoning categories like MU2 and CO. Again, we are not the experts in these zoning categories, but we did discuss with planning staff and with Jeremy, and we tried to come up with some variation of that. But we believe that we should cap the CR designation to 30% within the overall rezoning piece. Let me move on to explanations on each one. I won't go too much into this. It's already been talked about where we are high, but I'll just talk about one piece here. Around the mitigation piece, there is a 7-lane cross section that has been proposed, and for a normal pedestrian or somebody who's using a wheelchair or anybody else, I don't think that 7-lane crossing would be possible on Kuebler at 27th with the traffic mitigation. And so that's something we got to watch out for as we look at what kind of mitigations happen. I mean, I'm going beyond what ODOT has mentioned, what the planning staff has mentioned. It's something that we felt was pretty, dangerous to look at from a safety perspective. The specific usage restrictive clause. What we wanted to look at, and I know Mr. Shipman referred to a couple of these. So we wanted to have some restrictions specified in the approval, and this we are coming off fresh from the Costco scenario where there were verbal assurances, but nothing was specified in the original approval way back in 2007, and that allowed a massive structure like Costco to come up when the intention was just community retail or small local retail. So going on the same basis, based on everything that Mosaic has shown as to the intended purposes, we wanted to make sure that these 10 conditions, which basically restrict what kind of commercial outlets could be allowed or disallowed within the approval conditions, whichever be the zoning category. And I've just listed out each of these, but I'll talk to the two that Mr. Shipman talked about, the last two. No commercial building with a build out of over 50,000 square feet. This we specifically talked about, example given was Whole Foods. And when we looked at the average of Whole Foods nationwide in cities like Salem, it averaged about 40,000 square feet. Now, this was a layman's search by us at Cigna, but I'm sure they can come up with a better number, but something that can act as a guardrail and a better than the 70,000 that has been spelled out in the Planning Commission approval. And the second piece was around the no drive-throughs. We sincerely felt that this is so close to I-5 that if we have 3 drive-throughs, it's going to cause backups all the way. And yes, Jeremy actually talked about how traffic could be routed within the complex itself, but we felt it's really getting into a highly technical, very mathematical type of calculation, which can be easily, borne out wrong on specific days. I mean, the example I gave is the coffee shop that's there on the corner of Kuebler and Commercial, which invariably backs up Boone Street most of the time, right? So we want to be watchful of what effect it will have on the neighborhood traffic that's going to be impacted. I'm not going to drain the slide. This is all there in my written testimony. And the last one is around split zoning. So one of the things we wanted to work out with the developers is to, as I said, collaborate and come up with a solution rather than a flat yay or a nay. And one of the things we thought was, what if we restrict CR to a max of 30%? And can we work within that and look at MU2 and CO as two other categories split up into some reasonable percentages that will allow the proposed usages, but will not give the kind of traffic density that CR produces. And this has two effects from a Cigna standpoint. One is it doesn't give the vast, unlimited type of build-out capabilities that CR provides, generally speaking, even though intended uses may be something, but once you give CR, it is a field left wide open for interpretation, and nothing later on can restrict the construction. So that is one of the main reasons why we wanted to kind of act as a third guardrail, how we could restrict the development in a way that meets the intended uses. I think the development plans are not bad at all, but at the same time, try to mitigate most of the issues that we are trying to look at. Again, we are not experts at each of these zoning categories, so I'm sure planning staff would have their own opinions, and maybe they might overrule whatever recommendations we are providing, but it's a way of looking at it differently than just a black and white CR or no CR. So this is where we wanted to go with. So as I mentioned, we oppose rezoning of the entire property to CR. That's something as a no-no, which is what is supported by the planning staff as well. And three main issues that we feel is contributing to it: traffic congestion, specify restrictions on usage, and look at split zoning partition as a way to move forward. And as I mentioned earlier, we are absolutely open to collaborating and working. We had an excellent working relationship, have an excellent working relationship with Jeremy from Mosaic, and would love to collaborate further with him and the planning staff. Thank you. Open for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Jake? Councilor Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is more of a comment than a question. Thank you, Jake, for being able to succinctly provide the testimony on behalf of Cigna under 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Then we have one other person, Michael Hughes, has 3 minutes. Michael? There you are.
Hello, my name is Michael Hughes. I live at 935 Barkstone Court Southeast. And as a board member of the South Gateway Neighborhood Association, I've become involved in a number of land use decisions affecting our neighborhood. Lately, the latest one we've been involved in is discussions with Mosaic about the property at Kuebler and 27th. Most of the new housing that's occurring in Salem these days is either in West Salem or Southeast Salem along the Battle Creek corridor. In the past 10 years, there have been hundreds of new residences built and hundreds, if not thousands, more planned or in progress in this area, including a few hundred within a half-mile radius of the property in question. Mosaic has been very good about talking to our neighborhood association. I think we're making progress, but not quite enough, obviously. When they showed us their first proposal for retail commercial zoning last year, they stressed that they wanted to develop it as an upscale, mixed-use, walkable development, which sounded great because of the residential property in the area, as well as the Boone Ridge retirement community, which is within easy walking distance. We had a few questions, and they've met with us a number of times since to see if we can work something out. In November 2021, city staff recommended denial of the application for comprehensive plan and zone change to retail commercial. mainly due to transportation analysis and traffic mitigation. They also stated that they discussed ways to limit the amount of business that was automobile related, as well as the possibility of the commercial office designation, since it would not have the same peak levels of traffic as the CR at Costco. In December of 21, the Planning Commission voted to grant the application despite the staff recommendation. Among the main arguments were that the property could be developed as a regional commercial center, and that physical factors such as topography made it incompatible for residential development, despite the mixed use and apartment proposals that were shown in the mosaic plans. I don't know whether the Planning Commission didn't see those or what. Cigna immediately filed an appeal and has since had a number of meetings with Mosaic regarding possible compromises, including proposals to partition the land into tracts with different split zone designations.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Your 3 minutes are up.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Hughes?
Yeah.
Yes. Councilor Nordike?
Thank you. I didn't quite catch the end of Mr. Hughes's comment. I would appreciate hearing that. Also, I see on the map there's discussion of a couple of schools that are in the area. Can you speak to anecdotally the approximate number of school-aged children that might be impacted by this development?
There are a couple schools, but I don't know how, quite honestly, I don't know how many students they have.
That's okay. I can ask someone.
We have testimony from the school district.
Yeah.
Actually. So, go ahead, Mr. Hughes. Did you have, she was asking if you had.
Oh, I was just going to say that we came up with at least 3 split zone proposals, in addition to the ones that the one that you've seen, and gradually we've worked closer and closer to something that would work out. But the latest one, they still call for 43% CR, which we don't want to go over 30. And I think we could work that out, but especially since they've got 2 hotels that would be allowed under the mixed use zone, but they want to put them under CR for some reason. Anyway, at this point, since we haven't been able to reach a decision, and the only thing on the table is whether to approve it for retail commercial or not, I would be against the approval for commercial retail.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Councilor Phillips.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael Hughes, for being here tonight. You mentioned the topography of this area. I think I know what you're talking about, but for those people who haven't been to this zone, what are you hitting at there?
Well, it's on the side of a hill. And when we were talking about the split use part, they suggested that the eastern portion be zoned for commercial office because they could put some offices, including their office, would have a nice view of the Mount Hood and the Cascades, and there's a nice view from there.
Okay.
Because you're looking out across the freeway, and I think that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, no, it is a big hill. I agree. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, anyone else? Okay. Mr. Shipman, did you want to rebut?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, do you want to have questions for staff before applicants rebuttal?
Oh, I'm sorry, I sure do. Olivia?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
So, Olivia, this latest supplemental staff report from December 21st, when you want to look at a staff report on this, because this has gone on for a bit of time and changed, which report would you refer to as the kind of the definitive staff statement on this thing?
I mean, I think our outline of the traffic concerns in your May 9th staff report are pretty concise and to the point.
Okay.
All of the decision criteria that's addressed in both attachment 4 and 5 of your staff report. So that's November 2nd, Planning Commission staff report, and then the supplemental report, December 21st, after we tried to work with the applicant. Both of those have our staff's opinions about the traffic concerns in them in their entirety. But I think your May 9th staff report is pretty concise.
Well, one of the things that comes up in the December 21st is who has the burden of proof on this traffic issue, because this does seem somewhat problematic, and the staff seems pretty straightforward. The burden of proof, let's see, how do you put it? Quite simply, the burden of proof is on the applicant.
That's with any land use application. Mr.
That is the way it works, right?
That is the way it works.
They have to prove this traffic system will work.
Mm-hmm.
And is your argument, is the staff argument then, and I'm looking for a real simple way to kind of get to it, that without more current traffic studies due to substantial, and I forget there's a term of art you all use, but a substantial change in the area because of Costco opening, is that really kind of at the heart, that just absolutely has to happen, and without that we really don't know what's going on? Or you could do it and you'll find out that it doesn't work like we're telling you it won't work? But
I mean, I would defer to Kevin, the traffic engineer, but I think that you're correct. I think with the current proposal, there's not enough data, for my understanding, for traffic to support the application. And Kevin can correct me if I'm wrong.
is Kevin out there?
He's out here somewhere. There he
There
is.
he is. Kevin, is there a way for these guys to satisfy you? What's it going to take?
Well, I think, yeah, the original stance of staff was that there was a lot going on with Costco that was unknown, and that waiting and doing the counts when Costco opened was a critical kind of base to start the traffic study. So that was one of the key issues that we have.
Okay. Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Kevin, if you could stand, I guess I was hoping that you could go over how you interpret ODOT's memo and their concerns, and sort of tell us your version of where the differences are. Is it strictly the fact that Costco wasn't open when they did the traffic study, or is there more to it than that?
Well, ODOT, as Scott kind of mentioned, they analyzed ODOT's interchange facility and had made a recommendation for 3 lanes. And I think ODOT was, the response was, no, we don't want 3 lanes. That creates issues and we don't want to deal with it. And so I think they just kind of said, well, there's nothing really available to do, so we'll just decide to do nothing. So that's my take on that. In terms of the traffic study, some of the critical issues were the date of the counts and Costco, including the actual Costco traffic. The weekend counts that were kind of alluded to, those were done for Costco, and they are, the TPR does say that the traffic engineer does have the right to determine the scope of the study. And the reason we look at weekend counts for retail is that, weekends tend to be a high use. And considering that this is, basically sharing the same entrance or same major access point as Costco through the roundabout, that has created a greater concern from staff on how that will work. And then the nearness of that roundabout to the intersection of Kuebler is a concern. We looked at a roundabout at Boone and Battle Creek when Costco was first being looked at, and we couldn't make that work. So there's some concerns there, underlying concerns, and DCAS does a great job, but there's still parts of the study that we're uncomfortable with.
Thank you.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. Kevin, another question for you. I'd like you to address the stacking issue a little bit. As I understand the city's position, stacking is going to happen outside of the development. As I understand Mr. Shipman's position, stacking is going to happen inside the development, so we don't have to worry about that as city councilors. Could you respond to that, please?
Well, it happens at both. So there is stacking internal and stacking coming in. And, what we're looking at is, especially people visiting this site, they'll be coming off of the street system, and there'll be left turns and through movements, and those will stack up, and some of those queues will be quite long, and that's generated some concern.
A follow-up question. Do you, Mr. Mayor, if I could, we've talked about the honeymoon period that, well, it's a big deal when something opens and then it gets a little quieter. I think about that every time I go past the In-N-Out Burger out on Kuebler Square. I never go by there any time of day or night when there's not 50 cars backed up, and that's been a honeymoon period for a long time. So do you have any response to, well, it's higher in the beginning and then it slows down?
In-N-Out Burger is really unique. So fortunately, we're not dealing with that. But yeah, generally, new developments do have a higher use for the first month or so. And I think I haven't done a lot of review of Costco. I did watch it in the beginning, and I did see things kind of settle down a little bit as people find their way, find their favorite route to and from. So, I think that happens with everyone. And I don't think this proposed use or Costco is a lot different than In-N-Out Burger.
Any other questions for Trevor?
Yeah, thanks. I think this is for Mr. Hopman too. Is Costco at its maximum trip count now, that property, or will there be more trip counts moving forward?
Costco is developed. I think there's some out pads that are still going to be developed, but the majority of the site has been developed.
So the majority of the site is developed, but there will be more development. And I guess my question is still, just to clarify, would that generate more trips, or we're not looking at more trips?
Olivia has her hand up, so.
Yeah, let Olivia.
I just wanted to clarify, Kevin can answer the traffic question, but there are 4 retail pads still unbuilt, 2 of them with drive-throughs. I'm not sure we know the tenants yet.
Okay. So, but we could assume that there could be more moving forward, given that it's not, you still have those out pads that haven't been filled in.
Right.
Now, I guess my final follow-up question is, in the questions that were asked of the applicant earlier, they had said that this was going to fail. If we do nothing and we just let the time clock speed forward 20 minutes, this is going to fail. What in the world are they talking about?
Well, they have as part of the TPR analysis, transportation planning rule analysis, they have to look at the future 20 years because they want to change the zone. The existing zone was already kind of incorporated within our transportation system plan. So they're correct. So they have to do a traffic study to look at the future for what they have. But that doesn't mean that future traffic studies for all of the other developments won't determine that mitigation is needed. So they're correct that they are looking at the future, but there is intermediate on all of the land that is already zoned. Those will come in and could have to do traffic studies, and they could have to provide mitigation. So they're the system isn't going to stay the same. The streets are going to change, whether this comes in as it does or something different. There will be changes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure if this question is for Ms. Diaz or for Mr. Atchison. I'll defer to staff to decide, but I know that on our choices tonight, we have approved this thing, deny it, or refer it back to, basically remand it back to the Planning Commission. Tell me what the practical ramifications of referring it back to the Planning Commission are, please.
Go ahead, Dan.
Thanks, Olivia. Dan Atchison, City Attorney. So practically speaking, you would ask the Planning Commission to just reconsider the application. Another option, if you think there's more ground to be plowed here, is to just hold it open, hold the record open, and direct staff to work with the applicant. I'm not sure how staff would feel about that. Of course, our opinion really doesn't matter in this instance, but if you feel that there's things that we can accomplish, you can do that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Atchison. I guess that would be a good question, and I don't know when or if it's appropriate to ask the applicant, are they interested in working on this further? And if they are, I'm interested in giving them some more time to go back to the neighborhood, go back to the Planning Commission and work it out. But if they're not, then I'm ready to make a decision. So I guess how can help us navigate that?
Well, the applicant doesn't have an opportunity for a rebuttal, and you're welcome to ask them that question at that time.
Thank you.
Olivia, I had one. Oops, I'm sorry, Tom, you go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a follow-up question. I think this is for Dan. So what happens if this is denied? Does that stop the applicant from coming back at some other time with a revised plan?
So if it's denied, we would issue a final written decision. That decision could be subject to an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals.
Yeah.
If the applicant opted to come back with a new application, it has to be substantively different than what was originally submitted, and that's sort of a subjective determination.
Right. No, that's very helpful. I understand that we can have appeals if it's denied or if it's approved. I just was curious about what is a substantive change, and I think that's kind of what the neighborhood group and other people are talking about here. If they can reach some other kind of agreement. Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Olivia, one other final question for me anyway, is this change in the application? We have one application, a change, another. How much of this, just you deal with this stuff a lot, is a function of looking at what the Salem plan has sort of tentatively proposed for this area? How dramatically different is what we're looking at from the Salem plan? And I just wonder, and I can ask the applicant this, but you're the expert for us. Is this kind of one of those, we're going to come in early so we don't get caught in the Salem definition? Do you see what I'm saying?
I don't think that it's going to get caught. I do think that the CO zone is a lesser intense zone. I know Kevin and staff have tried to work with the applicant to come up with different options of CO mixed use or CR, because we do see that the CO would produce different, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, I'm not a traffic engineer, different times of trips. So the trips would be at different times than Costco would be, and that would be beneficial to the traffic system. But I don't think that I think that they didn't want to wait for Salem, and then the zone is different than what they want on the site.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then we can, if no one minds, we'll go to Mr. Shipman for rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm going to have Scott Manser from DKS start us off.
Thanks, Mark. Can you hear me okay, Mayor?
Yes.
Perfect. So I just wanted to kind of hit a few things. First, there's been a lot of discussion about ODOT. And I just want to just remind everybody from a TPR requirements, ODOT allows a tolerance of impacts to their intersection. And per their code, per their Oregon Highway Plan and the requirements, our impacts were within that tolerance, and therefore they accepted our study without mitigations at the interchange. So I just wanted to clarify that. And Mayor, you had brought up several things that you're not used to seeing in a staff report, the staff questioning the traffic. And there was really in the May 9th staff report, there was really 3 items that were discussed that we weren't meeting standards. One of them was at commercial Kuebler. And there we had minor impacts. We changed the volume to capacity by 0.01. And I'm going to get a little technical, but I just want to make sure this is on the record. The Salem City Council voted on January 24th to approve the same VC volume to capacity tolerance that ODOT approved on plan amendments. And that's in section 64.025 E1B 2BB, which allowed that 0.03 tolerance. So that was one of the things that staff raised, and we meet that requirement. The second thing was related to Battle Creek and Kuebler. We recommended improvements, dual left turn lanes from a TPR standpoint. Our volume to capacity significantly improved. The delay went up, and so staff said, this seems kind of strange that the VCs, you're increasing your capacity, but yet the delay is going up. And it has to do with what some of the direction staff gave us to keep the signal timing and the progression on Kuebler the same. And so it is common to have that capacity go, and it's not anything that's going to trigger the TPR not being satisfied with a significant effect. And then finally, the last one was Kuebler and 36th. And then they said that we only recommended a proportionate share, and that's actually incorrect. The Planning Commission recommended the full improvement be completed at Kuebler 36. So that also is no longer a TPR issue because that is in the Planning Commission. And then the final is related to the weekend counts. And Kevin's correct that the TPR does allow the traffic engineers to evaluate it, but you have to evaluate it to the city's transportation system plan. Your transportation system plan is not a weekend-based analysis. We have to compare to your 20-year evening peak commute period is what we compare. So there is no weekend analysis for us to compare to actually analyze the TPR. What we've done is consistent with the TPR requirements. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Scott, very much. Mayor, I've got 2 points I'd like to make. The first is how dramatically different is this application, the CR, than our Salem, and did we try to slip one in? And the reality is that when we started our application, we filed our application, our Salem had this property designated and proposed for CR, commercial comp plan designation, which we're asking for, and zoning for CR. We felt really good. We felt like this is a great application. We were going to go through the process. Midway through our application process, our Salem changed, not our application, our Salem changed to CO. And that substantially affected both staff's view of our application, both from the planning view and also from traffic view. Had we stayed with CR as they initially had proposed, I don't know that we'd probably still be here because Cigna wanted something different. But just to clarify that for you. Second, Jake from Cigna, I think, used a great term. He said guardrails. And I think that was a great term. And in Cigna's eyes, they didn't feel like the Planning Commission put up sufficient guardrails with respect to what this applicant was proposing. And I want to disagree, respectfully disagree a little bit. Cigna's requests were off a bit with Cigna with respect to a couple of key points. But I feel like the Planning Commission really did a good job with respect to parsing that line. And there was a lot of deliberation and debate from the Planning Commission with respect to what should they do, how many drive-throughs, what's the proper size of square footage for retail building, not just any building on the property. And I felt like they arrived at that narrow path that this applicant would have to pursue. And so with that and with the mitigation, what you wind up with is, I think, is some pretty robust guardrails. Thanks,
Mark. I'm sorry. Well, what would be your objection to going back to the planning commission, taking another run through this and make sure, after reading this lengthy report, and you come away from these if you're not technically wildly savvy, but I came away from it getting the feeling, and I saw the 7-1 or whatever the number was in the vote, but I also had the distinct impression there was some trepidation on the part of the commission. It wasn't a full-throated, let's charge this thing on through. I didn't get that impression. I had the impression that they did it. They did it, as they felt was correctly. But I just wonder, would you object to going back to them and kind of taking this through again, see if there's anything that can be done to kind of compromise on the COCR, the traffic issues, get a better hit on the traffic issues, or some sort of agreement with traffic on what's going on? Is that a
great question, Mayor? Great question. You know what I miss? I miss being in council chambers. I miss being face to face, because when I was in council chambers, I could turn to my left and I could look at Jeremy and say, hey, Jeremy, what do we want to do?
Yeah.
Okay. Here, I'm looking at a screen and I can't communicate too well with Jeremy via Zoom to say,
yeah,
yay, nay. And so what I'd like to do, Mayor, is I'd like to turn it over to Jeremy.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So here is the issue that we have, in all honesty, with going back to Planning Commission. Right now, currently, our Salem is going through.
Right.
Plain and simple, period. And as that gets passed, this piece of property will be CO. There will be no mitigations associated with it.
Yeah.
And if we go back to Planning Commission, CO is going to get passed in that time. There's no way we can go back to Planning Commission and have that happen by the time CO gets passed. That's the issue. We had tried to be way in front of our Salem.
Yeah.
But we had issues on the traffic with staff. They, in essence, kind of did a de facto moratorium on us by trying to say that we had to wait for Costco to open. And so we were dealing with this traffic issue the whole time. But we were always coming in as CR. We did all of our traffic with best practices under CR. We met all the requirements of the TPR, and it all got held up because of a concern with Costco, which I understand. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But now Costco is open. Everybody can go by and see it. The system seems to be working, albeit, yes, there are 4 outlots still remaining to be developed, but they're not going to be huge impacts necessarily to the overall system. If we go back to Planning Commission, we're going to be fighting this timing issue with our Salem. We might as well just be CO, not be putting up the $4 million. There's too many things going on simultaneously to have it make sense of the problem.
Yeah. I think I really appreciate how rapidly you think our Salem is going to be completed. I think thanks. But I'll just share with you, maybe I'm just being real kind of negative about it. It feels like, yes, we're headed in that direction, but I've also watched the comprehensive plan over time be changed. And I can't believe that if there is an acceptable proposal that comes in, that suddenly we have our traffic guy saying, yeah, I think we found a way here that you would face some problem over the issue. I mean, we've never been, at least, and others can correct me, but over the years, I can't recall us being reluctant if we have an agreement and a plan that works and a neighborhood group that's sort of happy, maybe not thrilled, but sort of happy that we won't move forward. I don't know. I just hate to see it just denied and not move forward. I'll be honest with you. I'm sorry to see that happen if you all can find a way to get through this thing. But that having our traffic staff just say this just doesn't work is pretty hard to ask the council to just completely overrule them. I mean, that kind of staff recommendation is a very strong recommendation. We don't see those. We just don't see them. And particularly with traffic, our guys have always been probably bent over backwards. I think as one of the counselors mentioned earlier that I think Tom did, that we bent over backwards to agree with DKS is widely respected. So I don't know. I just trying to encourage you. And I know I'd really rather we're in the council chambers where you all we could take 5 minutes and you all could talk. I don't know, maybe we could take 5 minutes and you all can message each other. But I'd really like you to think about it for a minute.
If that's allowable, we could certainly do that. I don't know
Why
the
don't we
rules
do
in this
that?
day and age.
We'll take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
Okay, is that okay? Where's the lawyer? Where's Dan? We okay, Dan? Thank you.
That's fine, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. we'll come back to order. Jeremy, you, Mark, did you guys have a chance to kind of talk about this, think what you'd like to do?
We did. Yes, we did.
Excellent.
Can I get a drum roll? No. We would be willing to go back to planning commission. I don't know what the technical term is. You remand it back there. Maybe it would be
What it is on our agenda. It shows up as overruled, yeah, remand is one of them.
Yeah, right.
That's the term they're using. It lets us send it back.
Okay. Yeah, so we would be willing to do that. The hope would be if we could finish this with Cigna and get to a final mixed use and, finalize that. We'd have to, we still have work to do with staff, I believe, on the traffic thing, because there is this weird impasse that we've had since the beginning with staff on traffic that I think we can maybe work through with Costco open now, now that people are seeing what reality looks like, I think, so.
Great. That's great. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yep.
Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry to throw a little curveball here for a second, but another option that we mentioned but really didn't explore too much is just keeping the record open for 30 days. So it has the same effect where they could still go back, do their work with staff, and then just come back to us rather than having to reopen a planning commission process. They would just bring it, we would just keep, essentially retain jurisdiction over it, let them go do their work, and then finish it up in a month or so. And I would just toss that out there. There's an option too.
Okay. Councilor Nordike?
I move to remand the application to the Planning Commission.
I'll second that.
Are there still questions for the applicant before you consider that motion?
We pretty much run out of questions unless someone has any further. I don't think so.
Mr. Shipman had raised his hand for a moment, I think, after my suggestion.
Oh, had he? Okay, I'm sorry.
If he has a response.
No, I'm good with the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, any discussion? Yes, thank you, Tom.
Thank you. My question is for the city attorney. What, if any, is the difference between just denying the application and remanding it to the planning commission? I guess the only thing is if we deny it, they can come back through the planning commission again, but there has to be a substantive difference or a significant difference. Is that the only difference between remanding and denying?
In this instance, Dan Atchison, city attorney, in this instance, by remanding it back to the planning commission, you're essentially not making a decision on the substantive application. You're sending it back for further consideration by the planning commission.
So in that situation, if we just remand it, I'm sure that the staff and the planning commission will be aware of our discussions tonight. It'll, at least the staff will be, it'll come back to us. And at that point, we have the same options we got now. We can deny, we can approve with modifications, we can remand it again.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Nordike.
Thank you. I'm making that motion to remand for a couple of reasons. One, I see that the Planning Commission has viewed this application very differently than this council has. And so I think this is an opportunity for the Planning Commission to see things from our perspective, learn from our conversation. We had a great back and forth, both with the neighborhood association as well as the developer and their representation. So I think this is an opportunity for us to send it back to Planning Commission with that feedback in mind. And I'm always, happy to hear what steps a developer can make to address the neighborhood's concerns.
Thank you, Councilor. Anyone else? Yes, Councilor Phillips.
I just don't want to catch people off guard. Thank you, Mayor, for acknowledging me. So I'm probably going to vote no on this motion because I don't support, I think I'm just in favor of denying it now. And I just want people to be aware so that when we come back to this in future, if it comes back to council, there has been a big enough change. But I would prefer to say no and agree to the the ultimate change to, what is it, commercial office is what I think the transportation system can ultimately handle here.
Okay. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to join with Councillor Phillips for basically the same reasons.
Okay. All right. Well, if no one else has any comments or want to debate this any further, why don't we have the recorder call the roll on the motion?
Counselor Stapleton. Aye. Counselor Anderson.
No.
Counselor Phillips.
Nay.
Counselor Leung.
Nay.
Counselor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Counselor Hoy.
Aye.
Counselor Nordike.
Aye.
Counselor Varney.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, the motion passes. We'll remand this to the Planning Commission and ask staff, and I know staff will carry the message that we had in our discussion. And again, thank you, Mr. Shipman and Jeremy, for your willingness to continue to work this issue. There is a way to get this through, I think, if we can continue to see good faith discussions on it. Okay, we'll move on. Just 1 second here. I can get this thing out of the way. Okay, special orders of business. We have Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move staff recommendation on item 3.3G.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I pulled this item essentially for purposes of discussion. I intend to support the motion, but I know at least one of my colleagues wanted the chance to have a conversation about it, so I pulled it for that purpose.
Very good. Okay, who wants to have that discussion? There she is.
It's me. It's me. Boy, after our discussion over the last hour, it answered a lot of my kind of questions and points that I wanted to bring up. The Dokes Ferry thing obviously is a residential, a zone change thing. And so getting back to whatever, I mean, the reality is we need housing, and we need housing that's affordable. And I'm not against growth. It's going to occur regardless. But, you know, we're also needing to look at the larger picture. And as these things kind of pop up with traffic, it always seems that it's traffic. And I think it's important, you know, because individuals are bringing concerns to us regarding traffic and safety. And I think it's important that we look at it. The land use laws are complex and confusing. The traffic analysis units and everything are really complex and confusing. I mean, when we're dealing with average daily traffic volume, that's a period during a weekday, and the volume capacity ratio that is, you know, capacity that something can carry, it is confusing. And I'm just really glad we're having these discussions. West Salem, just like the discussion we had before, has streets and intersections that are controlled by both ODOT and the city. And when we have different standards of acceptability and we use different metrics to evaluate these things, of course it brings up questions. It's like measuring a piece of paper using inches versus centimeters. You know, they're different outcomes that may or may not always line up. Another thing with this particular project was the condition of the trip cap that was associated. It said the condition that was there was the transportation impacts from this 24.84 acre site shall be limited to a maximum of 500 multifamily units and, excuse me, a cumulative total of 2270 average daily vehicle trips. That number and that, anyway, relationship between those two is based on 4.5 trips per workday per unit. So one of my questions was, and it's not really a question, I guess these are observations. The staff report said 22-102 from 411, the city council meeting said the trip cap of that many of 2270 trips makes it an enforceable ongoing requirement for the future development. Well, being the person I am looking outside the box, one of the things that I think about with that trip cap is, what if, at least here in West Salem, because of economic necessity, sometimes we have 2 or 3 leases going on within one unit, which means we have more cars, which is probably going to up that trip cap. So I'm not looking for an answer, but the situation kind of begs the question. If the trip cap is 2270 trips, how will that be measured and enforced under these other kinds of situations? And if the cap is exceeded, what sort of actions are taken? Like I said, I'm not really looking for an answer. I'm just talking about processing reality and what we're looking at right now. So I'm just going to wind this up with, I'm looking forward to when we start the process of updating Salem's transportation system plan, because I think it'll be a great time to be talking about a lot of these things and the traffic impact analysis, because we need updated data, updated statistical models, and so we can compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. And I also want to remember, when we get into that at the end of this year or next year, basically looking at when we had planned to, we need to continue the outreach and the collection of input from Salem residents and incorporating their input, just as we have with the Our Salem process. So those are pretty much my comments. You know, that we have to make decisions based on the best available information we have at hand, and the recommendations from our professional and knowledgeable city staff. And I appreciate all of you. I just wanted to say that. So that's my comment for the evening.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, let's, Councilor Hoy, you want to explain one more time what we're doing here?
We're just basically finalizing or approving the decision we already made. We're approving the order for the decision we already made.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if the recorder, please call a roll.
Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
Counselor Phillips.
Aye.
Counselor Leung.
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Counselor Hoy.
Aye.
Counselor Nordike.
Aye.
Counselor Varney.
Aye.
Counselor Stapleton.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. We'll go to information reports, and I wanted to call out, what am I calling out, Virginia? What was the youth?
Yeah, 6B.
6B, thank you. So did you want to hear from?
Yeah, I would love to hear from staff on this.
Okay.
Why don't we hear from
Here's
staff
Lori.
first, and then I'll ask any questions I have here.
Okay. So Lori, you or Gretchen, who's speaking?
Lori, go right ahead.
I knew she'd hand it right over to me. Hi, everyone. I'm Lori Shaw-Casarez. I'm the Youth Development Education Outreach Coordinator. And the information report is a return to council after being asked to look to expand our Care Corps service leadership program with some sort of integration of more equitable opportunity built into it, as well as specifically focusing on workforce development and integrating more of that into that particular program. So the first, the information report explains kind of the approach we're taking with that. There were 3 steps, and that included the approval of an additional $35,000 of, I believe, general fund that is to put towards a Care Corps coordinator housed at our program partner, Isaac's Room. Most everyone knows it as Ike Box Cafe, but that's the youth program over there. And that we would house the Care Corps coordinator at Ike Box, which builds capacity for me to actually look at not only expanding the apprenticeship program portion of Care Corps and the IQuest program, the barista program at Ike Box Cafe, it's all integrated together. But we also wanted to be able to increase numbers of participants over time, maybe build in some city opportunities for work experience directly connected to that program, which we're already working with Amanda Sitter in Parks, and we hope to expand that in time as well. But that also capacity-wise was to free me up to look more into the community at how to build even more workforce experience and development, skill development for youth and young adults overall. And so we're already starting on that, which is kind of exciting. We're doing a number, I am having a number, excuse me, of ongoing conversations and meetings with local partners on a number of potential opportunities that we're going to be able to develop or are currently developing in the next fiscal year. So it's everything from kind of a middle school level, My First Jobs program, so that we catch them a little bit earlier and begin to develop soft skills like communication, the importance of punctuality and attitude, finishing a job that you start, but kind of doing short experiences for them, but already building their resume on top of all of that. So we have a number of local community partners that are interested in developing that more. And then I'm also looking at, we're actually working directly already with the Salem Keizer School District's career and college program, which every public high school has a career and college center. So we're looking at the district level, but getting into the buildings as well. And just helping them with both potential work study placements as time goes on, and or short-term experiences for young people, kind of a menu of options. And I'd like to have the city have some work experiences for them as well. In addition, I'm looking at putting together city career kind of introductions and exploration for youth and young adults in our community in partnership with the school district. And so that would include everything from annual guest speaking circuits, so tours into some of the different high schools. It may be short video clips featuring different services and careers that you can find in the city. Most young people have no idea everything that you can do in a local municipality. So just exposing them that way. Continuing with our focus groups, we've had a number of youth and young adult focus groups who've provided input to our Salem and Climate Action Plan. It ends up being career exploration as they get to know other city staff and are in real time, a part of work happening in the city. So that's just a few things that we're already working on. And I'm also looking to build in some short-term, heavily concentrated work experiences just within youth development, probably along the lines of an internship or several internships. We've had youth development, we've used to call them pre-pandemic. They were volunteer event assistants that actually learned a lot about digital creative content making, event coordination, budgets, that sort of thing. So we're looking to see if we can't turn that into some paid experiences as well. So there's a lot. There's a lot that we're doing. That's a small snippet. But I hope we were wanting to honor both the action of expanding CareCore and the impact there, but I also want to take the spirit of what you were asking and look to expand that just so we can have a greater impact and hopefully even recruit future city staff to the city of Salem.
Very good. Thank you very much, Lori. Councilor Stapleton, did you want to?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I couldn't be happier with this. Thank you so much for the report. It actually was very uplifting to read. I wanted to say that I really appreciate, I have some notes here, so sorry for not looking at you in the eye. I wanted to really appreciate and acknowledge the fact that you are doing so much to have relationship building with Salem Keizer Public Schools and with local businesses. the idea of representing Salem at the Leadership Summit coming up in Washington just really brings a lot of joy to me personally, and very excited to see what that event holds for you. The civics lessons and the life skills that you're teaching kids in our community needs to be highlighted and is appreciated. And then, of course, the additional help for kids participating with the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance with the gas cards or the bus passes or any way to help keep them engaged in the process. Like you were saying about the Our Salem or the climate action, just so important. And I really appreciate the extra work that you're doing on this. I'm really excited to see how it grows in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Leung.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First and foremost, thank you for this wonderful report and for giving updates on what's happening with the youth development. I'm really excited that you've now increased staff, so now that you can maximize your time and be able to identify other programs and ways to support this program. I do have a few questions or more comments. First, on what page is this? 3 of 4, under step 3, progress number 1, when you're talking about workforce readiness programs. You identified several different community programs to get students involved with different activities. Have you also, I know that these are not the only ones that you have worked with, but these are some of the main ones. Like, for example, the Mayor's International Council and the Salem Human Rights Council or Commission. Both of those have community-based organizations, a lot of them that are culturally specific. Are you planning on doing any partnering with those organizations? That's the first question.
Not right off the bat, but I appreciate the even thought and would be happy to pursue that as well.
Thank you. And my second question, if students were interested in getting involved as part of the Care Corps program, what is the process for students to get involved?
So as the program is transitioning over to Isaac's room, they are taking on registration, and that's about to launch within another week or so. And so we start to send out the word through media releases, through school districts. I mean, either all the different programs involved, local organizations, community partnership meetings, neighborhood associations. We just try to, it's a wide net that we would cast, and then it would be an online link to register for the Care Corps. The summer camp in the summer it's 3 weeks in July, starting July 5th.
Thank you. And my last question, at least for now, it has more to do with like, if this data is of course available, like, do you have a breakdown of like where students have been accepted throughout the city? So for example, is it more students on the north side, or which high schools are you getting the most number of participants from?
Yeah, for Care Corps specifically, but really for all of my programs, I would say, and I think I may, and forgive me for not having that readily available. I think in the original information report on Care Corps for you guys to review, I might have broken down some of the demographics in there based on just participation. But I would say the majority are Northeast Salem and South Salem. South Salem High School catchment area more so. And then just varies from there. West, Kaiser, we do get McNary students as well, and Sprague students. So, but generally speaking, it's a really, I know these aren't specific numbers, so that's why I apologize, but it's actually a great representation of our true community in any of our programs, including Care Corps.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Well, thank you very much. I look forward to having you back. I think we'll all look forward to it, hearing how this progresses, particularly as you go through the summer season and after you return, the return from Washington, all the other things going on. Look forward to kind of an update. This is an issue area that we're all very interested in. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Anything else on information reports? Have any questions? Okay, why don't we move on then to first, I think it's first readings is next. Yes, First readings.
Ordinance Bill number 822, an ordinance relating to street paintings, amending Chapter 15 of Salem Revised Code and Salem Revised Code 900.015 and declaring an emergency.
Okay, Counselor Stapleton, this is your idea.
Sure. Let's see here. Which one? I'm sorry, because I've never done this before. Which one do I read? I know I could say
The
staff.
staff recommendation, just conduct a first reading.
Okay. All right. I move to direct staff to conduct a first reading to consider Ordinance Bill 8-22, amending CSRC Chapter 15 and Chapter 900.
Second.
Who said, Counselor Leung, okay. Go ahead, Virginia, and tell us about this.
Sure. This is really exciting. I actually just went to Grant's Neighborhood Association this last week, and they had 4 proposed ideas for their first intersection art. And each of them were so professionally done and beautiful looking, and each had a story. And the outreach to the community has been going really good. And we all got stickers and could vote on which one we wanted. And so it was really a great fun activity for us to do as a community, and really brought out a lot of conversation and a lot of excitement about installing this artwork and pride in their neighborhood for what they're achieving together. And that's exactly what I hoped to achieve with this program, was to create community, beautify areas, and make placemaking in our communities that really bring pride and a place of a sense of self there. And so this accomplishes all those things, and I'm really excited to see it move forward in this way.
Great. Okay, anyone else? Okay, the recorder, please call a roll.
Counselor Phillips.
Aye.
Counselor Leung.
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Counselor Hoy.
Aye.
Counselor Nordike.
Great idea. Aye.
Counselor Varney.
Aye.
Counselor Stapleton.
Aye.
Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye, okay. Move on to a second reading there. Let's go to second readings then.
Okay, ordinance bill number 622, an ordinance declaring certain territory located at 4090 Milton Street Northeast, annexed to the city of Salem, prescribing zoning and withdrawing the territory from the Marion County Fire District Number 1 and East Salem Sewer and Drainage District. Counselor Leung.
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Counselor Hoy.
Aye.
Counselor Nordike.
Aye.
Counselor Varney.
Aye.
Counselor Stapleton.
Aye.
Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
Counselor Phillips.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye, okay, motion passes. 7.2B.
Ordinance bill number 722, an ordinance declaring certain territory located at 4929 Auburn Road Northeast, annexed to the city of Salem, prescribing zoning and withdrawing the territory from the Marion County Fire District Number 1. Counselor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Counselor Hoy.
Aye.
Counselor Nordike.
Aye.
Counselor Varney.
Aye.
Counselor Stapleton. Aye. Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
Counselor Phillips.
Aye.
Counselor Leung.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye, okay. And that one passes. So we'll go to public comment. Peter Meyer. Peter Meyer here?
Yes, Mayor.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. There he is. Peter, you're on. Okay. I can see that Peter apparently, he was here, I remember.
I'm sorry.
Ah, there he is. Okay.
Sorry. Now,
That's okay.
I don't know. I
Boy, Peter, I think we're having a real problem with your connection.
I can't say anything. I hope that, okay.
There we go. So
Maybe if he turns off his video, that would help free up some bandwidth.
yeah, you want to do that? Turn off your video and just leave and just speak. Turn off your video, Peter.
Yikes.
Peter, turn off your video. Okay.
We also accept written testimony?
Yeah. I think we lost him.
Oh dear.
Okay, well, I'm gonna suggest we adjourn, and we'll try to make contact with Peter, let him know he can submit a written comment or find a better spot to hook up. It just, it wasn't working. So thank you very much. Have a good evening, and we're adjourned.
For more videos and for more information, go to capitalcommunitymedia.org and follow us on social media.